Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Elena Christopher with HFS Research. I'm pleased to welcome you to what hopefully will be a fun, informative, and engaging webinar today. We're going to be talking about RPA and automation, and the task at hand is moving from task automation to transformation. And some really good dialogue about what that means and how to really think about picking the tool that's going to work well for your enterprise and really help get you to scale. So I've got some great speakers with me today that are going to help me address this topic. I'd love to introduce Sharath and John. Sharath, why don't you go first? I'd love it if you could spend a minute to introduce yourself, please.
Hey, thank you, Elena. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Sharath Gopinath. I'm the Director for IT Services Finance at Bacardi and Intelligence Automation COE. Been with the company for about 9 years now. Obviously, there's nothing to complain about. It's Bacardi. I hope everybody on the webinar actually realizes no Bacardi. A lot of products behind our, a lot of brands behind our organization, and we're super proud. And a great organization to work for, and we had some amazing journey the last couple of years into intelligence automation, RPA, etc., which we are here to share and talk about. So thank you, Elena.
Super, thanks for that, Sharath. John, over to you. Please go ahead and give an introduction.
Good morning, everyone, afternoon and evening. My name is John Wehrheim. I'm the Vice President of Redwood Robotics here in North America. And it's a pleasure meeting everyone. I've been with the company now for about 2.5 years, and I've been in the software industry for pretty much my entire career. As some of you might know, Redwood has been in business for the past 25 years, really focused on automation. And our goal and objective is really to provide automation solutions for all of our customers. And obviously, Bacardi being one of our customers and very strategic customer for Redwood, we're very pleased to have Bacardi with us today to speak about their experience around automation.
Super, thank you for that, John. Before we dive into some of the content, I want to just run through some quick housekeeping. So we can get through a great discussion and a bit of HFS content from some of our latest research as well. We're going to ask you guys to submit your questions via our Q&A feature on our menu. So you'll see the icons at the bottom of your screen. Sometimes they're on the top of your screen. In any case, find the Q&A folder and you can submit your questions there. You can start submitting as soon as you want to. We'll keep an eye on them throughout the program today. We'll do our best to address some of them as we go, and then we will save some time at the end for some Q&A. Worth noting, if we don't get to any questions, we do always go through them, and the team presenting to you today will review them and do our best to get back to folks if you do share your email IDs with us. So with that, what we'll be talking about today is, I mentioned we'll share a little bit of the latest and greatest HFS research on RPA and integrated automation, primarily from a recent study that we did in partnership with KPMG, where we talked to about 590 enterprises around the world. So we'll look at some of the latest adoption trends there. Then we'll toggle over to a nice interactive conversation with Sharath and John, talking about Bacardi and their finance transformation journey. And then we'll do our best to leave you guys all with some really good actionable recommendations. So let's dive in. What I want to start with is just quickly, who is HFS? So originally, we've sort of jokingly have been saying that we're doing a bit of a lucky gold star with our name. LG, of course, formerly known as Lucky Gold Star, now is known more colloquially as Life is Good. We're doing a bit of an LG with HFS. Originally, given our heritage in tracking the sourcing industry, we were Horses for Sources, which was HFS. These days, we're recasting ourselves as the hyper-connected future state. And what we do with that is that we're essentially looking at various different technology and change agents. So it's sort of these elements on the left here and how they impact how enterprises run their business operations, essentially how the elements on the left are impacting the elements on the right. And the hyper-connected future state comes into play because we find both within enterprises, you're working very much towards creating what we call the digital one office, breaking down your own internal various silos, but that also working to create various digital bridges to external organizations, your partners, your customers, et cetera, to create new types of ecosystems as well. And this is how we think of the hyper-connected future state. But that's who HFS is. And some of what we're perhaps most known for in the marketplace, aside hopefully, and folks' opinions, providing a heck of a lot of good research, often a lot of which is actually provided out there into the social media sphere on a complimentary basis. But way back in 2012, we were actually the first analyst firm to really start tracking robotic process automation. And in fact, as the mythology goes, my CEO, Phil Firsch, actually in working with the founders of Blue Prism actually came up together with the term robotic process automation, or as Phil likes to say, we put the process in RPA. So we definitely have been tracking this for quite some time. But perhaps we'll call it maybe 7-year itch or something along those lines. But now, earlier this year in 2019, we put out a sort of a next-gen blog on this topic stating quite boldly and provocatively, RPA is dead. Long live integrated automation platforms. Part of why we put this piece out is because as we continue to look across the marketplace, talking with just many enterprises around the world of different sizes at different stages of their automation journey, the one consistent thing that we start to see is that there's a heck of a lot of task-focused automation, very small projects, sort of a looming disappointment of enterprises not achieving what they would hope for, and this prevailing sense of where, or prevailing question of where is the transformation? And that's very much what we're going to spend a bunch of time talking about today. And a big part of why we think there is this lack of transformation and some of this disappointment, or at least some false starts with many enterprises, is around just the very concept of RPA. RPA has become a catch-all terminology, but the reality is that we estimate, just as this box I just brought up, the vast majority of the so-called RPA deals out there are actually robotic desktop automation, otherwise known as, or often known as, attended automation, which is a lot of automating tasks, working with, typically being initiated by humans, and automating pieces of tasks, as opposed to the unattended automation that was sort of the original true sense of the RPA term. But when you really, as an organization, you're striving for that transformation again, but you're applying a tool like RDA, which is a perfectly great tool, and thinking that it's RPA, there starts to be a bit of a mismatch. So really just wanted to briefly highlight that. I mentioned I'd also share a little bit of data with you from some of our recent studies. This is that study I referenced, about 590 business leaders from around the world, including 100 C-level executives. And one of the key things that we're always trying to understand is the why of any change agent. Why are you investing in this? What are you hoping to achieve with it? And so we'd asked enterprises, both from a strategic standpoint, as well as from an operations standpoint, what are your expectations for automation? And what comes up from the strategic standpoint is it's all about helping enterprises drive new revenue growth, additional revenue growth, so real top-line impact. From the operations standpoint, it's a very distinct focus on all things customer, improving the customer experience, improving how you service your customers, so a very strong emphasis on improving customer experience overall. I'll draw your attention to this lower right-hand corner. The area that came up as the lowest expectation, or sort of least amount of expectation, is around eliminating headcount. So there's very much some, again, lofty expectations, but squarely focused on true business benefits like driving revenue growth and improving relationships with the customers. So that's what the baseline is, sort of the why, if you will. But then we follow through with, well, let's see where the spend is coming from. And when we ask enterprises, where is your investment? when you're investing in intelligent automation. Where is this coming down for? So understanding that you're trying to achieve additional revenue growth and really satisfy your customers. And so, of course, what makes the most logical sense is that the bulk of the investment is in finance and accounting. So again, another bit of a mismatch there. But there's loads of great work, and this conversation today will eventually be about finance transformation. There's loads of great need and fabulous work and opportunities for automation within finance and accounting. And it's also perhaps lower risk than some customer-facing tasks and such. But that is where we see the bulk of investment thus far, ostensibly in internal operations, often back office focused areas. The other thing I'll just quickly draw your attention to on this slide is what's at the bottom of the stack in terms of investment. We see that despite the want to really impact customer experience, it has been the lowest area of investment that far. We do anticipate that that's going to change, and we've already seen various signs of that throughout 2019 thus far. But when we finish this study earlier this year, this is how the cards were dealt, if you will, and this is how the bottles were stacked, so to speak. And so we now see what do you want to do with it? Where are you actually spending your funds on automation? But what we hear a lot in the marketplace is that enterprises are having challenges with scale. So we simply ask, well, what are your biggest issue areas? What's causing you not to achieve what you want to achieve with automation? And so interestingly, the biggest issue that came up is in fact scale itself. This is notable because I think it reflects the challenges of many enterprises. They're not able to do as much as fast with the type of return that perhaps they had expected for their investment in automation. But scale is also kind of a funny one because scale is sort of more of an effect than a cause. And so some of the other areas that I draw your attention to when we try and unpack this slide a bit are things like down here under lack of in-house talent. We see that because these are ranks, so rank 1, rank 2, rank 3. When you look at what really came in as one of the other number 1 ranks, things like lack of in-house talent, uncertainty about where your investment is coming from, lack of clarity on who's actually going to run this, who owns it, is it IT, is it business, is it both? And we'll come back to that point there. So the inability to scale is really getting in the way. And I'll point to, and the title of this particular slide is very intentional. Despite all the hype in the marketplace, despite all the crazy valuations of many of the RPA firms, we are truly nowhere near ready to declare robo-victory. What this slide shows is a variety of different intelligent automation technologies. So one of the important takeaways here is that enterprises are investing and experimenting across the board with these different discrete technologies, as well as trying to figure out how they work together. But of all of these, arguably the most discrete tool is RPA. And what we see on this lower right-hand corner is that it is the one that is actually the least scaled up and industrialized. And that is how I'm going to tee up our conversation and start to toggle over to my great speakers, Sharath and John. And so with that, Sharath, I'd love to kick off with you a bit, which is you work for Bacardi. That's a lot of fun. I honestly didn't realize Bacardi owned Patron, my tequila of choice, as it so happens. But I'd love to start with a bit about you and your organization. Tell us first a bit about Bacardi, and we'd love to learn more about your role and how it supports your enterprise.
Thank you, Elena. Very interesting. Yes. So those of you who have only kind of connected Bacardi to just rum, right? It is true that that's one of our iconic and core brands. But obviously, yes, we do own the other quite famous brands as well. Bombay Sapphire, Patron, Grey Goose, one of them, right? I mean, the history of Bacardi is very interesting. It's a very interesting company. It's privately held. And it's about 112 years old, right? 152 years old. There's a lot of history. It's very rich when you're talking about people and processes. They've come a long way, right? So And Bacardi, we are truly a global company. We have a portfolio of about 200 brands, 6,000 employees, 75 offices. We are connected to a lot of distributors. We are very connected to people. Brand is one thing, but then happiness and fun is the other synonym for Bacardi, that I would say. It's a fantastic place to work for. Now coming to my role. Oh, by the way, just for everybody's interest, we do have headquarters in really fascinating places like Bermuda, Geneva, Miami. So anybody who feel like visiting any of our offices, you can please send me a note, and I'm very happy to get you some very fancy cocktails around too. So we are truly an entertaining company. Having said that, my role, so we also have a very interesting setup within the organization. So we are IT, it's traditional IT, we report into the CFO, but what we do have the freedom is we do think innovations. Nobody really stops us from thinking out of the box, so it's very interesting. So what do I play? My role in the organization is I'm director for IT finance services. What that means is I'm responsible for finance applications across the globe, legacy, global applications, you name it. All of these comes under my umbrella. I'm very fascinated and kind of blessed to have that kind of opportunity to lead that that application space, because you get to really talk to a lot of users and a lot of our business counterparts across the globe and know how they work, etc. But with that as well, we do have very interesting turnarounds in the last few years as we started to get into this consolidated ERP implementation, which is SAP, and then moving into shared services model. And once that's happening, opportunities kind of raise out to say, hey, how do we kind of make things productive? How are we going to move into new areas of automation and help our business to achieve the maximum value? So that's my role. I kind of manage all of this. I am very close to the finance community. We actually, they do call us an extended finance team, and which is a pleasure to hear. It's not like traditional IT versus business. So we try to kind of incorporate very well. So that is also part of my role, which is key business relations management as well. So that's kind of the highlight, Elena.
Cool. Thank you for that, Sharath. And just to put a fine point on it, just around that, sort of particularly going back to one of those data slides I showed, which was some just as inhibitors to achieving success with automation, is some questions around who should run this. So are you within the IT organization or within business? It sounds like you're creating a bridge between the two, but where do you sit?
So that is clearly black and white. It is, I am the IT organization, and yes, we create the bridge. So we could talk about that in detail as well. But that's a very interesting proposition and ideas that we got from the business and IT on how we're going to manage that center of excellence and the roles and responsibilities around.
Okay,
So
super. We'll come on to that, Sharath, as I think is a natural flow of our conversation. I want to first talk a little bit about finance transformation. So in your introductory comments, you had talked about just really some of the road that you've been on with Bacardi, and it does not start with RPA. It starts with a transformation journey. But I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about how Bacardi's focus on finance transformation really has started and how it's evolving. And really what I'd love for you to focus in on in some of those comments about really what are the overarching objectives or drivers that Bacardi is striving for. Sort of like that data slide I was showing earlier. Hey, we want to drive additional revenue. We really want to improve customer experience. Why is Bacardi embarking on finance transformation? What are you guys trying to achieve?
Right. So thank you, Elena. So a very interesting question, and we could talk loads and loads about it. But obviously, I'll stick to the very key pieces that we think that is kind of becoming effective, right? So if you look at the roadmap here, yes, we started off with SAP, like any traditional company started to move on to transformation. Now, let me come back to digital transformation. What does that really mean, and what's the objective of our strategy, organization strategy? Is we listen to the business. We started to understand, okay, we have SAP now, we have shared services now. where are we going from here? What is it that we need to, where is it that we need to start to build efficiencies? A, to make sure that we are able to focus, number one, on our top line growth and keep our bottom line as slim as possible. And then the second point is it's not all about cost and it's not all about headcount. You know, that's it is not how we kind of address it. We kind of put it more, how fast can we provide results to the business so they can get to decision making? So we think in that angle. So that's where all of digitalization came into the picture on what is our strategy? What is it that we are looking for with digital transformation? So in a nutshell, what we really look for is, yes, productivity is there, that's a given. It's going to come with these automation opportunities that we embark on. But on the other hand, it's more about, if I close my books in 2 days, how much of impact that is going to cause in the business. So today, if you close in 12 days, by the time they get their entire P&L and try to understand, you know, where are the open points, what are the risk and opportunities to make a decision, you're flowing into the 15th or the 20th days of the next month. Imagine your competitor has got much more, has a larger workforce who are actually able to do that faster. You might be missing up on opportunities. So what are we doing from a support organization perspective to provide that information to a frontline so they are out there grabbing every opportunity possible? So that is the angle, how we were looking at digital transformation, what we want to get out of it. And efficiencies and all of these are byproducts and part of it.
Of course. I like and respect the competitive advantage angle, because I think it's part and parcel, because that obviously gets tied to top line revenue generation and such. But it starts to be its own entity as well. So an interesting one. I do have a clarifying question for you though, Sharath, because I notice on this transformation journey slide that you had shared with us, it ends at S4 HANA 2020, well, in advance of that 2025 deadline. I think it's now set at yet. But I just also like to know, I mean, is there any pressure that emanates from that S4 HANA deadline? Does that drive what you're trying to do here, or put a fine point on it at all? I just really would love to understand a bit more about where this very real, albeit in the future, but still very real deadline, how it perhaps impacts some of your decisions here.
That's a very interesting question, and it is pretty just fresh off the table, because I had a steering committee this morning, so we precisely had a discussion with the leadership team. So S4HANA, the way we want to look at it is S4HANA is just as a normal life cycle of our information technology, one of the products. So ERP is one of the enablers in our information technology portfolio, and we are thinking, yes, in 2-3 years time we need to upgrade it, and that's how we want to look at it. Why is that? Because when we started off the S4HANA journey, it became a transformation journey, and from the transformation journey it became to an upgrade. Meaning, why that shift is one of the biggest questions is when we put together a business case for S4HANA, it started to become yet another transformation initiative. And obviously the board will be, okay, wait, we have a Patron acquisition just happened. We have new ventures in business we want to explore. So how much of money do we really need to invest in technology that now the entire business is focused on that? Because if you're talking about an implementation of SAP and things, you know the entire business is focused on that. So they want to be very strategic here. So S4HANA is what we want to make it is part of a blend into our transformation journey, yes, but it's more along the lines with everything else needs to continue, being cognizant about the fact that we might implement RPA and everything, but it's all with future-proof understanding S4HANA is going to come. But also S4HANA would be kind of more a migration than a retransformation. So the decisions that we make around is very much that my team is personally being trained on S4HANA as we go, so they know exactly if we are making decisions before the migration happens, everything that we implement or going to implement will actually blend into it and is reusable. So that's kind of the angle that we are going with, which keeps us much more in our strategic line and being tactical at the same time.
Cool. Thank you for that, Sharath. And I mean, I sort of appreciate some of the points around how It's a little bit of chicken and the egg in terms of what starts to really promote the transformation. But I do like the idea of it's an upgrade. And you also bring up a really important point around, it sounds like a lot of the extensibility, which is you want to make sure you're not doing things in the interim just to have a Band-Aid that help actually get you there. We'll come back to that sort of no technical debt point in a moment. But let's talk a little bit about RPA, because that is kind of our major topic of hand today. So we first started sort of the bigger, broader finance transformation. RPA is part of that. It starts to roll into your digital transformation. But I'd love to hear you tell us a bit about how RPA really came into the fold. Why, as part of finance transformation, how did you discover RPA? Give us a little bit of the backstory. Why did you think it was going to be a tool that could help you on your finance transformation journey?
Yes, super. So, I mean, in general, one of the key activities or tasks for my services, which I lead, is looking externally to win, right? So that is part of our process anyway. So any services that we support the business, we always are looking out for new technology trends, and so Gartner and HFS, and so we kind of follow these. And back in 2017. 2016, 2017, there was a lot of hype about robotic process automation. So, naturally, our CIO came and said, "Hey, guys, I mean, shared services up and running, so we need to kind of take a look at this, right?" So that's how we kind of started to embark on robotic process automation. Again, it's nothing that we dug into it for first or anything. We just followed the crowd. So, like I'm saying, there was a hype about it. So yes, okay, there's hype. Now let's see what's off the shelf and see what we can do about it. The second point is, again, as we started to explore robotic process automation, we started to think, we want to test and fail fast, so we can recover and move on and do the right thing. So we started to pick and choose a few not too sophisticated processes to kind of test it out. So that was the second. And mostly, what we started to understand is what is it that robotic process automation is giving from a digital transformation perspective. And as I mentioned before, it's by default, everybody starts off with a head count and efficiencies, giving back money to the business. It's all fine, but we wanted to add a little bit of angle to it to see really, there should be other benefits about doing this, right? If you feel, producing numbers fast, which was kind of the key focus there. So everything kind of molded against it, around that piece of fact that how do we kind of get all the way to show this impact on our top line. So that's kind of the digital transformation framework or mindset that we started to have, and that's when we started to move into this direction.
Super. And I sort of appreciate your forthrightness as well, Sharath, around it's because you say 2017, you weren't the first mover, you're following the crowd. But within that, though, the way and sort of the efficacy with which you approached it, which was, okay, I know what I'm being told we can do with this, but let's really dive in. Which brings me to this next piece, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that by the time that you really started to think about applying RPA to your Bacardi's finance transformation journey, I believe that Blue Prism was already entrenched somewhere in your organization as an established vendor. I'm curious why, because you ultimately, for this finance transformation we're talking about today, you ultimately went with Redwood. So just wondering how you went through that decisioning process. Why did many enterprises, they sort of have gone through the due diligence of picking the vendor and say, okay, we're now standardized on this. You guys went a different route, and I'd love to hear a little bit of your logic about how that transpired.
Yeah. So as I said, we wanted to test and fail fast, and I'm not saying in any means that we failed drastically anywhere based on the vendor. But when it comes to finance transformation, we had key stakeholders and a bunch of issues that sat at the audit committee. So where I'm going is auditors, but one of our primary stakeholders here, our internal audit team. we are a medium to large size company. I would tell you, with 6,000 employees. We are very much privately held, and our ERP, 95% of our business is in one ERP instance. Now you can see we have less complications than many other organizations outside. So we can, there are certain risks and opportunities based on the setup we are in, and we're also lucky in one way. We just have one SAP system. Now, having said that, our direction was, okay, we have to address audit needs because we have significant deficiencies when it comes to posting journal entries or running reports and month-end close, etc. So we started to line that up. And the second point we started to look out is we need basically to enhance the user experience where people are used to use Excel, but also how can we kind of move Excel to an application-based user interface, and it interacts with SAP. That doesn't necessarily mean we need to take mimic something what you're doing in a keyboard from a desktop perspective, move it into another system. It was more we were looking for what's the best way to integrate into our SAP landscape with transparent to the business, but it all happens beautifully behind, rather than a 3 or 4 step process with other robots, which will be great for companies where you have multiple instances of SAP or different ERP systems. I get it. But since we are on that direction, we said we want something that would just be a 2-step process. You go into a user portal, and then you do your activity, and that just gets parked into SAP right away. Having said that, our evaluation criteria was more about what's the application that we could use that would integrate to SAP behind the scenes, and really a desktop automation was really no need for us at the point in time. We did not see a kind of efficiency gain there. So that's basically how our evaluation criteria roadmap started, and then naturally we thought we thought Redwood was actually fitting our requirements and need at that point in time, and we said, okay, this is the best approach for us. So that's kind of the story around our evaluation criteria at that point.
Super. Thank you for that, Sharath. And it's, again, no ill will towards Blue Prism, but I think the prevailing point that I'm hearing you say is that it really just was about, based on your particular needs, really picking the best tool that would serve the purpose here, and just the Redwood's ability to tie directly into your SAP system, among other points, was quite compelling. John, I'd like to weave you into the discussion a bit more, because just on this point around Redwood coexisting with other RPA tools, Bacardi's not the first example I've heard of this. I'd love to perhaps get a few of your thoughts on, do you think that this heralds a move towards, as enterprises are sort of establishing their RPA and broader intelligent automation strategies, do you think this heralds a move towards process-focused RPA versus general purpose, and maybe some semblance of coexistence? I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Elena. Yes, I think, it really resonates what Bacardi is doing, right? And we see time and time again that there is a multi-vendor landscape. Now, I think there's a lot of reasons for a multi-vendor landscape. One is that a lot of companies have made an investment, whether or not it's small or just doing some easy trials or proof of concepts, but they made some kind of investment in what I'll call the user emulation RPA or the RDA type desktop automation solutions. But now they're looking to really look at a strategy on how can I roll this out really transformationally, enterprise, across the business, to really streamline their operational efficiencies. There is a place for the user emulation or the GUI-based desktop type solutions where you're just looking to do something very simple, task-oriented. But invariably, what companies are looking for is they're looking for the end-to-end process, right? How do I connect all my systems and applications to go across departments, go across users, go across entities, and go across systems? And that's where I think Bacardi and our other customers are really seeing the value that Redwood brings, is that, one, we can integrate all these systems together, truly bring out an end-to-end process and allow them to scale, right, very efficiently as their business grows, as they acquire new businesses, as they try to roll out the transformation across their business. Where's a tool that I can utilize that goes across all these different complexities within their operations? And invariably, a lot of times when we go in and have these discussions, you know, companies are looking, well, I want to automate what my user's doing. Well, that's probably not the best approach. You need to look at how can I optimize my process. I don't want to necessarily mimic what the user's doing. How can I optimize that process and take it full advantage of my operational efficiencies and streamline the timeline and control my overall costs? Like, you know, Sharath brought up the audit capabilities, right? One of the things that's very important to our customers is how can I make sure that I'm auditing the entire process, not the process itself, but every single step along the process. And I think Sharath will talk about this in some of his other slides that he has, is that every single step along the process, I want to be able to have auditability and control so that my internal auditors and my external auditors can see what's truly happening in that process so that they can very quickly and efficiently you know, get through those audits.
Cool. Thank you for that, John. And I've got to say, I mean, I think to me, one of the most compelling things that you just said is this focus on, it's not just automating the process, but it's how you can optimize the process. And that's actually a brilliant segue to this next piece, which is Sharath. I am decently sure that one of your proof of concept ideas for Redwood was around automating manual journal entries. I'm pretty sure that you told me when you pitched this to your CFO and your CIO, they thought you were nuts, or because you work for Bacardi, I'll say, they thought you were hitting the sauce, Sharath. I'd love to hear how you actually managed to get buy-in for this. And I know we've got a bit of the sort of the way that this process used to look here. Maybe you could just briefly give us an overview about what the process looked like, and then we'll toggle over to John's point about how you optimized it.
Yeah, sure, Elena. So we have a finance transformation program which has multiple layers of projects within that you know, everybody's responsible for. And one of the biggest program, and then I was the program manager for entire RPA. And one of the things that we started, like I said from the beginning, I mean, one of the key problems that we had was audit compliance and the average time taken for a journal to be posted, impacting closing, etc., etc. All of these problems were there. And while the first meeting, I have a partner in crime, of course, which is our assistant corporate controller, pretty awesome person. So him and I was sitting in the room with a few others, and we said, look, I think we should robotize this, you know, because building a workflow in SAP, I've done that, been there, isn't great. So you know, there's a lot of maintenance. Let's figure out if we can robotize it. And we were joking about, hey, let's name the robots and things like that. And then we got on the plane and we were joking about it. And I remember sending a note to John saying, hey, John, can we name the robots, you know, to make it fun? But in the end, when we pitched it to the management, one of the things that they said, I don't want any robots to post any journals. Who's going to verify the robots are doing it right? Actually, they didn't really understand what it meant. They probably really thought that there was a little tiny robot running behind the scenes to do stuff. So we had to give that explanation. Now, you know, it is a shock, right? I mean, it's a change. People haven't seen things, how it works behind the scene, and they're just not going to believe some dude saying that they're going to kind of impact their books, right? So there's a lot of relationship building behind before they kind of trust you when you're implementing new technologies in an organization. So that's one piece of it. So having gone through that beautiful iterations of discussions with the teams, and our CIO is a fantastic believer of new technologies, and he was fully supportive. But later on, when he started to understand the integration, etc. What we started to look at is, okay, what do we have today that we need to solve for? And we knew that it takes about, to post one journal entry. Again, I said we're not a super huge company, but we have enough transaction that goes during the month end. We've got 3,000 to about 7,000 journal entries, depending quarter end or whatnot, that goes into the system manually. And what happens is entire globe sends a spreadsheet using our IT ticketing tool to the shared services. They have 30, 40 people around just sitting there, removing it and trying to check the entries and then reposting it. And if you see the flow, it was at least about average of 4 hours waiting time in America time zone, over 12 hours for the rest of the world because of our shared service in Costa Rica, and 2 to 3 hours of processing time. So if you're looking at the end life cycle of posting a journal entry, I mean, you had so many people involved in time. And that all relates to the timeliness of when you can actually provide your financials to the management to make decisions, right? So that's how we started to look at it, see how can we make it efficient.
So this was your sort of as is state. And I'll also draw the attention to just, you guys had mentioned some of the audit errors, 2 out of 5 audit errors. I mean, so aside from the time, this was also not a perfect process at all. But let's look at what you guys did to it. Why don't you tell us about, so when you were successful in getting the buy-in, you had a supportive CIO. So how did this turn out? I see some very different timelines here, Sharath.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was definitely a hit. I'll tell you why. So number one is, what did we do is, the primary complaint of a user, now we start to go into super design thinking and user experience, right? We started to speak to our users, listen to them, and primary thing they said is, oh, I store all of these spreadsheets on my desktop, and if I'm on holiday, I don't have a central place to get it from, and then I have to send it to shared services. So there were all of these kind of complaints that we heard. And the key point we noted about is central. We keep hearing central, the word central. Okay, central, got it. So we started to enhance the user experience, saying, look, you just go to one place. We have an intranet site, and you have finance, you have an e-finance tags there. You just go and click, and you go into one portal. Now, the central point of entry became a very interesting factor for the business. Now, the second thing from there is we started to say, all right, now you can just retrieve your template from there. The template is open. You can add any fields you want. You can remove any fields you want. And then you have the approval process behind the scenes, which is basically the core of the robotics, where we have a nice, beautiful matrix that is approved by corporate on the thresholds of posting manual entries and who needs to approve what. And most importantly, the supporting documents. So they are able to attach the supporting documents into the central component. They're able to click on the entries. The entries goes into approvals. The approver opens it, and everything is attached back in SAP. So when it comes to an auditor just looks at the entry, he takes a sample, he goes, double clicks it in, he goes and looks at the reports, what are the supporting documents, who approved it. The entire audit trail, as John mentioned, from a process A to B was there. We even see the logs and who logged into the portal, when, how many documents that they started and discontinued and read it. We have all of that information. And that's exactly the time we went to. We went from hours to minutes, which was a fantastic move. But obviously, after 2 years of working on that, people will be like, okay, what next? So that's where we stand today.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's worth noting, it's for as much as we want to talk about broad enterprise-wide, or at least broad functional transformation. I think that the challenge, though, is that when we want to talk about examples, you end up talking about interesting examples like this, but that are part of a broader process, but very compelling results nonetheless. So one of the things that this makes me think of, going back to some of the mentions of S/4HANA that we were talking about before, which is you guys are eventually you're en route to a migration here. So one of the things I think RPA gets accused of regularly is it's incurring technical debt. It's basically a Band-Aid for the moment for enterprises to find ways to, I'll use John's phrase from earlier, to just automate things, to make them easier for the moment while they're figuring out a better plan. But I know in some of our previous conversations, Sharath, you were very adamant that that's not what you're trying to do here. But I'd love it if you could explain a little bit more about that. And John, by all means, please jump in if you've gotten any additional color commentary.
Yeah, thanks, Elena. Exactly that. Exactly that. So think about. I mean, there is a cost to everything that you do on a daily basis. I believe in that. So imagine we are trying to get a band-aid to say, you know, in two years' time, I'll figure out what to do. For now, I want to just fix this, and that's kind of temporary thinking. I believe in strategy. I believe a lot in strategy and foolproof solutions. And I would love to think, and this is something that our CIO is very, very keen on, is that when you think of a solution, you make sure it works 5 years from now, right? And when the entire technology landscape is changing, you just need to know how this solution stands out and being able to be adapted. So that's the design thinking principle behind. And we are very much practitioners of design thinking. We love it. The business and us, we join hands together to do that, and that allows us to not think about temporary solutions, but future-proof solutions. And that's the idea. Now that's the reason why we find out, our lessons during our learnings, if we find out that there's something that's temporary that might change later on. We are not super accurate at that. I can be absolutely transparent. We can't absolutely know how this technology will look like in 5 years' time, right? But it's most the knowledge and assumptions and the team that we work with who contributes to the idea. We kind of really split out everything that is temporary and we focus on long term, and we keep building on that. So that's basically the idea behind.
Got you. Thank you for that, Sharath. John, anything to add to that on that sort of principle for extensible solutions?
I think it is. I think one of the first things that is very important to understand is, Redwood Robotics, we've taken a very different approach in the marketplace where, we are connecting directly to the application. So in the case of Bacardi, right, SAP ECC6, right, we're directly connecting into SAP. We have a standard connector that we manage and support those connectors. And the beauty is that because we're at the application layer and not at the GUI layer, although we can do that, but that's like the last step of the effort if we absolutely have to. The beauty about the technology we've incorporated is that, when Bacardi decides to go to S/4HANA, we provide them with the connector to S/4HANA, and there should be no reason that manual journal entry process should stop working. It should continue working even though they've gone to a new technology or a new system. And that's the fundamental problem around the user emulated solutions out there, is that anytime that user interface changes, Windows changes, Microsoft Office changes, and so forth, invariably that process is going to break, or that task is going to break, and now I have to maintain and support and redevelop a lot of that effort. But because we're at the application layer, we don't have to worry about that. And so, our ability to automate 70 to 100% automation for our customers and having, 100% uptime or close to it is very critical to the business, right? And with our focus around the back office, whether or not it's, financial close or procure to pay, order to cash, payroll and HR, supply chain, et cetera, being uptime and being responsive to the customer, and whether or not it's internal or external, is very critical. And the infrastructure costs, obviously, with the traditional RDA solutions, is extremely costly. You have to build out a whole infrastructure and IT organization to maintain and support that, where with Redwood you don't. And we can get into more discussions around that, but I think that's one of the things that Bacardi really saw value about Redwood, is that direct connection into SAP. And when they need to go to S/4HANA, they don't have to worry about redeveloping all their processes.
Yeah, it's a critical concept. I recall, Sharath, when we were first talking about your automation journey, you made a point that said, why would I build something, sort of an edict within Bacardi, why build something if it can't last for some future state? You mentioned 5 years on our conversation today. I've heard 10 years before. But just back to that point of trying not to incur technical debt, and your description, John, about how when Bacardi changes over to S/4HANA, there'll be a connector, and what you've built now will work then too. All right, so I know we're coming down on time, but one of the other critical topics I really want to touch on now is to really talk a little bit about change management and actually the humans in the mix, because that's one of the real realities about the automation world. Sort of like we were saying before, well, it's not just automating the process, it's trying to optimize and improve the process, but there's a whole bunch of humans that work in all of our enterprises that are not going away anytime soon. I always like to say that attrition itself far exceeds any impact of automation as of yet. But Sharath, you mentioned it earlier, being able to sort of win the hearts and minds and ultimately the understanding of the business practitioners, not just your IT organization, but the folks running these processes was really, really important. So I'd love it if you could take a moment or two and talk us through what the Bacardi approach to change management was, and who the heck is Robert?
Yes. So, like I mentioned, for us, robotics was more gaining efficiencies. We really did not think about headcount reduction. We never kind of mentioned it that way, but we always got that question, and I'm very. I talk to everybody. I'm pretty open. It's not like I'm in a closed door. So when I go to Costa Rica or when I walk around and talk to my customers, internal customers, and their colleagues, they kind of ask me, "Hey, Sharath, you're becoming dangerous for us. You're putting all these robotics in, and what'll happen to our jobs?" And I'll be like, "No, look, that's definitely not it. You want to go home at 5 o'clock. You want to have a couple of drinks at 4 when our bars are open. So what's the point of you be staying there and then working till 7 and go home tired? So we're trying to make your life better. And on top of everything, we are an organization. We are a team. We're on the same boat. We need to make sure that our brand is out there doing the best for us and for the organization. So having said that, it's transparent discussion, right? It's not a management talk going to them and say, oh, don't worry, we're not going to fire you, whatnot. But that's not exactly the conversation. Conversation is about what's the efficiency we bring. So this idea about kind of marketing the bots came from our shared services team. Young folks, very dynamic, very sharp, and they were like, oh, you know what? Let's create a contest to say they need to name the bots, and Robert was one of the names that they came up with for manual journal entry posting. So that kind of played out very well. So the team who won the contest kind of got an award, so they got kind of associated with it. So they became ambassadors within to kind of promote the idea, and also that kind of created a very easy change management process for us. We didn't have to sit in meetings and change management, OCM decks and stuff like that. We just went in straight. We spoke heart to heart, and people were on board. And that is a very interesting story that we can always take back with our careers to see how we can influence people when we actually kind of bring them into the loop of your ideas. It's a very good, also kind of a very leadership thought on how to run an organization very effectively, because end of the day, it's people who run the organization.
Yeah, that inclusivity, I think, is very important. Just one clarifying question here, Sharath. So it sounds like this was an ongoing effort. This is obviously one example tied to that manual journal entries, just to kind of, so we could pull through the thread on that one theme. But does this tend to be a conversation that's ongoing? Is change management ongoing for Bacardi?
It is, but it wasn't as difficult as it used to be. So now, if I mean, every week we say, hey, we capture demand for automation. We say, hey, folks, if you do something really ineffective that you think is ineffective, let us know. And so people come to us saying they want things automated. It's not the management. It's really the people who are doing the work. So that helps. So change management there, as you see, is kind of coming from within. They want
Gotcha.
it, not us
Indeed.
forcing them to
And that
change.
ability to, I mean, I've found as I've been studying this and been a practitioner for a number of years, is that the ability is sort of, what is an example of how proof that you've won the hearts and mind of the humans within your organization? It's when they realize the benefit, that it actually helps them, and they start contributing to your pipeline. Then you get a challenge of, how do I most effectively manage my pipeline? But that's a nice challenge to have. Okay, so as we sort of run down the clock here, we won't go too deep here, but Sharath, I'm wondering if you could just maybe give us a minute of, I'd love for you to just briefly touch on the benefits, sort of what you've done so far and where you're going next.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, obviously, we always have learnings. Nothing is perfect, and I do see some questions in Q&A. Have you looked at other tools that's out there which is specifically used for journal entries and things like that? Yes, we did. But and the learnings for us is, okay, if we would have used that, how would it have become versus what we're doing now, and how will we move forward? So sometimes choices are made. Choosing a tool is also the experience of the user. There's a lot of variables behind. So those are all kind of learnings and approach that we document and reflect upon as we move forward. And then we also kind of look at the benefits of what we did, and can we do better, or should we stay? So those things continue, and all of that kind of forms into our center of excellence organization, right? So this is the services that we want to provide. The learnings, lessons learned, evaluating different options, and how we kind of build that ecosystem that it kind of blends in, that the cycle continues and we become efficient as we go. Yes, so we do have a phase. We continue to evolve, right? So we have many other things that we can't really 100% automate within SAP. The other point I wanted to mention to the group here is, our evaluation of RPA doesn't mean that anything that can be automated should be automated. We also push back things back into SAP as well. So since we are an IT organization, I'm responsible for SAP as well. It's easy for me to make the choice and allow the business to, let them know, hey, we don't need to automate this with the robots. We can actually do it with SAP itself, right? Running a job or whatnot. So we kind of also make that distinction between native automation versus RPA. When do we need to use RPA? So that helps. And our roadmap is basically that we have all of these items lined up that we want to slowly start moving in. And of course, as we do that, the basis of why we think we want to move forward is kind of reflecting on the benefits. A successful completion of year-end close is very important for us with using the robotic solution. This fiscal year, especially after a big acquisition, the first year we're closing the books with acquisition, as finance folks can imagine, that there's a lot of number crunching at that point in time to make sure we are absolutely transparent. The auditors were exceptionally happy this year. The audit timelines were super efficient. They finished their audit sampling and internal audits pretty quick. So that was great, and external auditors as well. So we are kind of looking at expected cost reductions. As we'll start to see that reflect in our budget and future budget in the next 8 or 9 months. So that's kind of in a nutshell on our overall picture.
Cool. And the phrase "happy auditors" does not compute, so I'm wildly impressed with that. All right, so we're at the top of the hour now. Sharath and John, what I'd love for you to do, I always call this the lightning round. I would love it if you could each give one recommendation for our participants today. Essentially, your top recommendation for building scalable automation programs that deliver transformation. Sharath, would you mind kicking us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So today's world, this is the challenge that myself and my team have, is you have so many vendors, so many applications out there, and they all do a great job. I can appreciate that. It's fantastic, right? The amount of innovation out there. But what is right for your organization? How the business feels about when they actually are exposed to those software providers, it's mainly about the services. Don't forget, the businesses always want perfect services, so they don't have to kind of bother about something doesn't work. It needs to be taken care of. So large vendors versus medium vendors makes a lot of difference, because the tailored services are very compelling and appealing to the business, right? So we need to always put the business at the heart. That's my recommendation, and choose the right tool that fits into your architecture and your strategy of technology.
Super, thank you, Sharath. John, what would you like to add?
I think one of the keys is companies need to really look at what their automation strategy is over the next 1 to 3 years, right? As we talked earlier, so many companies are looking at, oh, I want to automate this one particular process or these tasks, but they're not looking at the overall strategy and how do they want to roll out an automation initiative, and do they want to build out a center of excellence like Bacardi has done, and how do they want to structure that center of excellence, right? If you're just going in and saying, I want to go fix this one little problem here and there, sure, there's tools out there, but our customers are looking at more of an overall arching automation strategy, and how do I get there, right? And it's not just the first year, it's over the next 3 years or 5 years. How do I want to automate and bring together my operational efficiencies, reduce my costs, be more customer service centric, be able to close my books much quicker, right? The impact of that. So I think that's the important aspect. And then, evaluating the impact and the costs that they scale, right? Invariably, what we see is companies that have started with other solutions, they're now coming at us because they quickly realize that they can't scale and the cost impact is exorbitant. And they've come to a point where the return on investment just isn't there. And so what other alternative solutions are there out there that they can start looking at to automate their entire enterprise and truly go to a transformation?
Super. Sharath and John, from both of your perspectives, I would say cheers to that. So we've had such a dynamic conversation. I know we're just past the top of the hour. I'd let us go over just a little bit because we started a couple of minutes late. We've endeavored to answer many of the questions as we've gone throughout. There are always a few that we won't get to, but I'd like to state that for any questions that have not been answered, we'll definitely, we always look at them and we'll circle back and endeavor to answer anything that we actually can. It sounded like Sharath gave everyone an invite to come hang out at the Bacardi bar in any of the cities. Sharath, you're in Miami, so I'm putting that on my list. But want to just really thank you both for all of your insights today as we talk about really how to make automation work for your enterprise, getting beyond task automation to something that's really, really scalable, and a lot of thoughts on picking the right tool. But just a big thank you to Sharath and John, and thank you so much to all of our participants who dialed in today. These, in addition to our response on the Q&A, these slides and this webinar will be posted in a couple of days' time and will be available on hfsresearch.com website. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a great rest of the day.